Yeah, maybe we could do these together. So when you look at this 8-year cycle, I do it for 2012, 2013, but really I started 2012, so for the years we go back and forward. So Pluto, 1909, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, nothing. No aspects, no confronting aspects from Pluto. None of the harshest stuff. Okay, but in Neptune, 1909 and would have been 1908 too, Neptune squared is Mercury. Idealistic, confused, distorted, puzzled thinking. Freud would argue, oh, that's his studying with the occult, his being interested in the occult. But at the same time, it was the time when he was studying with Freud. They were sharing ideas, and he was getting the ideas, learning from Freud, but he had another agenda at the same time. So there was a confusion right from the very beginning in his work with Freud. They both had their son in the seventh house. They both wanted to. One wanted the perfect student, the other wanted to be the psychotherapist, like psychologist, and wanted to prove his own ideas on it. And they each had their own agenda around it and created a codependency around it. But there was an evasiveness. The plan that Freud saw was not exactly the plan of how Jung was thinking. Then Neptune came and conjuncted his Venus in 1909 and 1910. Well, that's a very romantic, visionary, idealistic. Wow, I'm seeing this. Wow, I like this. It's seeing appreciation and values. Belief. It's magnifying. It's a very visionary type of time, 1909, 1910. So first the confused thinking, then seeing things. So then perhaps you could say a rapture, a vision of some of the more mystical things. You know it's there, I'm not sure what yet. Then it eased off in 1911, 1912, so it was not there in 1911, 12, or 13, 14. It came back when Neptune conjuncted his sun, which would have been the vision and purpose of a lifetime, 1915, 16. But at that point, it opposed his ascendant and squared, it opposed and confused his identity, humbled it, distorted it. So issues around relationships, around identity would have been a puzzle even 1915, 16. So this would have been some of the confusions at the end of the war. His new vision to go forward, but there were confusions about things at the end of the war, what he was doing. So like that was a difficult time, disorienting. So there's a lot of Neptune things going on when he first started seeing Freud and just after. Okay, now with Uranus, when he started seeing Freud, Uranus was opposing his Venus. This is the emotional shock or bankruptcy or shock of a lifetime. This is a funny thing, a funny puzzle, or seeming contradiction. He's studying with Freud. He meets him. They have a strong, intense meeting, and they're studying with each other. And he's getting Neptune, and he's seeing visions. And probably this Neptune was probably conjuncting the Venus a little bit before this too, and that maybe at the end of it, 1908. But we're seeing it here on 9. But he ran into a teacher. He's studying from him. He's getting visions. He's seeing things. But there's a shock. He was not being appreciated. His take, his value, what he saw of the occult and the mystical things that he thought was so special was rejected and shocked by Freud. So his relationship started on a rejection, started on a shock, on a letdown, on a heartbreak. So there already was. Jung took a lot of sorrow and a hurt and shock, but still held in for the practical side of things in seeing the importance of studying with Freud. But he took a lot of shocks or put downs for not having the same values, not seeing things the same way, for holding on to the occult or mystical things. And his credibility around his values and his understanding of them would have been poo-pooed or put down as insignificant by Freud, which each time would have been like a heartbreak for Jung. Okay, but Jung was by no means in a strong position to try and fight it. It's there. He's studying from a teacher who expects him to take everything, but doesn't see his addition to it. It's unstable, a shock, emotionally unstable and shocking. This could have come up in relationships too at the time, I don't know. Then it calmed off through 1911, 1910, 1911, and Uranus in 1912 conjunct his ascendant, shocked his identity, and opposed his sun and broke up his sun relationship, partnership. This is the year when he broke up with Freud. I got to do my own thing. I got to be free. I got to be in the bank. I see it differently. And it shook up his confidence in what he built up. It disrupted his son. Again, the contradictions of it both happening. This is Freud. He gets the sun on the descent. His ascendant and the sun get hit at the same time. So Uranus shook up everything that year. And the next year, Uranus kept opposing his sun for 1913. And these were years where he was very shocked, isolated from the psychoanalytical society, and he disassociated, he pulled away, just maintained his own little practice. So any visions of grandeur he had about bigger things, he was going through personal trials, what do they call it? Horrible confrontation with unconscious psychosis. It's described in the beginning of the Red Book. He resigns from a psychoanalytical society in 1914, 14-15, drafted into the army. So when he was drafted, it was not so much the big shock. It was the other disruptions from his being recognized as an authority in psychology and being out on the outside, being different, not fitting in. That was the big shock. So the war, he didn't work then. By 1915, Uranus squared his moon, causing change. This is probably the end of the war and causing the changes to home. This went on through 1915 and 1916. He was publishing, but this was trying to break with the past and let go of the past. So this were shocking, unstable things, and they led into the shocking breaking of the past. Uranus to the moon fed into the Neptune, conjuncting the sun, seeing his own vision, but opposing his ascendant, who I thought I wasn't it. It was the old was falling away. He couldn't hold on to it. But you can imagine how threatened he would have been by having to reject the very thing that he'd worked so hard to build himself up to be established in. It implied he had to build something new. So that's the Uranus. I mean, this, you could go through and you can get better diaries or better things. I just took a couple of main diaries and took out some relevant pieces. So I'm going over it, so we're going to read some of his little diaries and how it's explained for going through it. We don't have his explanation. We have other people's. We have the gossip around it. So we don't know all the intimate details. So you can see how Uranus was unstable and destabilizing his life all these years from 1909 to 1916. Both through Freud. First he dealt with Freud, then he dealt with the concentration camps. And Freud was convinced everything had a sexual repercussion, and Jung was convinced there's a collective unconscious, it can't just be all sexual, and then he had to deal with the concentration camps and other things. It can't just all be, but there's other things going on here, and the horror and the things around it. So, but there wasn't any Pluto things coming up. It was just not in being in control of his own direction or of his past. Having to break away from his past. After the war, he had to break with the past and set up a new him. And then fortunately, the vision came into the sun, and the Uranus opposed his sun, so he broke away from the old sort of psychologist and became the more newer type of psychologist that he's known for. So during the same time, I like to go through these in steps to see each one in place, because those are the big things. And Saturn is the main work. So when he's studying with Freud, even though he had the shock, the rejections, the shock, Saturn was squaring his Mercury and Venus. He was not being appreciated. And he was upset for it, but he was not being appreciated. He was feeling depressed, but working on it. So let me just pull this chart up again. The Saturn was squaring it, and the sun, squaring the sun, and no, it must be going up. The sun, I just opposed the MC in 1913. Okay, no, it's too down. Okay, so Saturn was going through Aries, second house, third house, down in this personal growth quadrant where he's supposed to be studying and learning, right? But he was not being appreciated. He was not feeling like money wasn't there, wasn't appreciated. He was in Jung's shadow, expected to just do everything Jung said. And he was doing it, they were working, he was putting the time in together. And even through 2010, Saturn was squaring the sun and squaring his ascendant. He was still working and backing up. Freud he was holding himself and his goals and his identity behind to maintain the work and the study. Then Saturn conjuncted his moon. He's defining his needs. He's still working on it, putting this Saturn defining his needs. Still depressing. These are all still somewhat depressing times until he got into 2012. In 2012, 2019, 2012, he went on a tour with Freud to North America. And Saturn was on ascendant, so he's not going to get more glory once he's got the identity crisis when Saturn's on the ascendant. Or Uranus was on his ascendant. He's in shock. What am I doing this for? But it's changed his world, got him out, and got people knowing him in America. But it opposed to Saturn, was breaking the confidence. So he was doing the work, but he was breaking away. And Saturn was coming down to his IC in July through the last half of the year and into 1913. And he didn't know what he wanted. He knew what he didn't want. He knew he didn't want to stay in Freud's shadow anymore. He didn't want to just go along with Freud's sexual complexes because he had a different vision of it. And it was profoundly affecting his deepest side. So he moved away from it. It brought out a new identity, but it shook up everything from the past. He lost his confidence. It had a big cost, but he still was in touch with his Saturn, which was a healthy thing. So by 2013, Saturn's still on the IC. It lifts that. 1914, Saturn's opposing his Mars. That's when he's in the army. And it stayed that way. Then by the end of the war, Saturn's conjuncting his Mercury and Venus. He starts thinking and working on his ideas and what he wanted, 2015, 16. 15, 16, no, in the end, 15, 16, that's still part of the war years, but he must have been thinking about writing something or doing something during that. And then by the time the end of 2016 came, Saturn hit the descendant and he starts coming out of the 15 years of Saturn below the horizon. Okay, so we can see the picture. I've made up little things of it, but I'm going to go through, where are we here? 1 second. I'm just going to pick up, I have it here. Oh, it's here, okay. I'm going to take,